Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm very excited because the M3 rear end just arrived here late last night. It's sitting down on the ground beside me. We've got to get it unwrapped and we've got to start doing some of the work to it that will allow us to transplant it into the car behind me. Why don't you come along and I'll show you how to do the rear subframe bushings on a BMW E90, E91, E92, E93, 3 Series or M3. So let's get started. So here on the table, we have some of the basic tools that we're going to use. You can get an actual subframe bushing remover, but we are not going to do that. I've heard mixed reviews on the ones that are sold online, and I didn't want to spend $300 on a tool that I'm only going to use once. So instead, I went to Canadian Tire and I picked up an extra propane container in case we run out, and my old propane trusty with the nozzle already installed, a large sledgehammer, 4 pounds, and a rubber mallet just in case we want to be gentle. The plan of attack will be to heat these things up so that they start melting, hammer them through the subframe, clean everything up, and then insert the new 2-piece subframe bushings into the subframe. But before I could do anything, I had to actually unwrap my new M3 subframe from the wrapping that it came in when it was shipped all the way from Arizona here to Ontario, Canada. I was pleasantly surprised that there was no rust, just like the pictures showed, and then I noticed that there were these strange braces that came because of it being an E93. I showed my wife the M3 bushings and compared them to the 335 bushings, and then got ready for the install. Here's the M3 subframe that we're putting in the car. Some of the first things I notice, which is amazing how different these things are, is the sway bar thickness. This is 23 millimeters. Take a look at that. This is 13 millimeters. Crazy. At the back of the subframe on the M3 unit, we see that the cross member for the subframe is total solid tubular steel with the vented diff cover. And on the 335, this is, I don't even know what, and the diff is not vented. So I decided to take the rear subframe off of the pallet and take all the M3 parts that I'm not using off of the subframe before heating up the bushings. In the meantime, Joel showed up in the Jenny and we're getting to work on the bushings finally now after getting some of the other parts out. So this is the M3 subframe. We swapped over the 335 lower control arm so that I can still use my coilovers, and that's why everything's still disconnected. The hub does not want to come out of the axle. That's being really stubborn. So we need these hubs for my new subframe. This is the old axle. We don't want this, but we need the hub. So in the meantime, we're starting to work on the bushings as promised. And Joel's heating it up. How's it smell, Joel?
Amazing.
Now this is a little bit embarrassing, but we were actually heating up the bushing at the front from the wrong side. I didn't notice this until later on, but there is a fairly large lip at the top of the bushing that would prevent it from sliding through. And so no matter how much heat and how much hammering we put on, the bushing wouldn't come out, and it took me a while to notice that. With the M3, 2 of the bushings, the front ones, are pressed in from the top, and 2 of them in the back are pressed in from the rear. So you have to flip the subframe upside down at some point in the process, and we hadn't realized that at this stage.
It's kind of fun, eh?
Yeah.
I believe the bushings are pressed in from the same side on all 4 corners on a 335, which is why we might have gotten confused about this on the M3 unit.
Okay, so Joel was here a little bit earlier and we were working on the front subframe bushings. They took a lot of work. Now I'm on the back ones trying to get them hot with the propane torch, and I think I've got it figured out on how to do this efficiently. essentially you want to get the subframe bushing boiling. So it's better to heat the area around the bushing rather than the bushing itself, because it's faster to do it that way. Now, when I used only the propane torch, it wasn't really working, and no matter how hard I hammered, it just wasn't coming out of the front. So what I have been doing is a combination of pouring diesel fuel on top of the bushing. It seems to burn at a good temperature, and also heating the area around the bushing with the torch. Now here, the diesel fluid, or diesel fuel, sorry, has also dropped down in this lower ledge, and that's burning off as well, which is helping me create more heat. What we're going to be listening for is basically like the sound of popcorn, and that's actually hot rubber boiling and popping. So you want to be careful. You want to have gloves on and long sleeves in case any of that rubber pops out on your hand, which is not what we want. So right now I'm going to basically keep cooking this and putting diesel on top until I hear it popping, and then we will start hammering it through. Can you hear the popping noises? Okay, let's go ahead and give it a go.
Before you begin hammering at the back of the subframe, it's important to put something in between those ledges to fill that void. Otherwise, it will begin crimping and you will lose some of the structural integrity of your subframe. I'm going to try to balance it here with my foot and hammer it through, but obviously that's not really working and the board already fell out. I'm losing a lot of energy and a lot of force by the subframe rocking back and forth. As you can see, that's absorbing a lot of the shock coming out of the sledgehammer, making my efforts not really that great. Finally, I decided to wedge that board in there properly, hammer it in a little bit so that it really absorbed that space the way that it needs to for an exact fit, put my foot down and started hammering the way that I should have in the first place. This was when I started having the best success, and this bushing actually came out easier than all the others.
That's how you do it, right there. Frig. Front ones took way longer. Back ones are easier. Even though they're larger, I can hit it a little bit harder without worrying about missing and damaging the subframe. So the 4-pound sledgehammer is pretty much essential for this job. The rubber mallet pretty much did nothing. To make it easier to pour, I put some diesel inside this monster can. Just put a little on top, and then let some run down the side so that it goes in that second layer down there. Light that up, and away we go. Hear it popping? There we go. That's what we want. Little did I know, the fourth and last bushing ended up being the hardest one to get out. I think it's because, as you can see, the space in between the top and bottom of the subframe was compromised. I don't know exactly what happened, but the board that I used on the other side didn't quite fit the way it was supposed to in this side. I tried hammering and hammering, and I know it was good and hot, but it just wouldn't come out, and I think it was basically gripping inside of there because the shape of the subframe had already been compromised. I had to go at it for a long time and finally got it done, but I didn't get it on video because I was just so frustrated and it took me so long. I'm not gonna lie, this subframe install job absolutely sucks. And that doesn't even include removing the subframe, which took me pretty much the rest of the week before this. I don't think putting the new ones in is gonna be that hard, knock on wood. But taking the old ones out sucked. Between switching over the hubs and the lower control arms or spring perches and taking out the old subframe bushings, I've been at this since 11 o'clock this morning or earlier, and it's 7:30 p.m. The sun is setting. So this is a tough job. let's try to get the new bushings in.
I really thought I would get through the rest of the day without any more hammering, but clearly I was very wrong. This bushing took the longest to put in. It's one of the back bushings. You want to make sure that you have enough room. I didn't really have enough room, but I also was so tired, I just wanted to get the job done. It probably would have helped if I jacked everything up in the air a lot further. You're going to want to make sure that the indented side of the subframe bushing is facing the ground and the flush side is facing the part that will go up to the chassis of your car.
If there's any pieces of jagged steel like this from hammering and accidentally hitting your subframe, you're going to want to clean those up.
I did the bottom first, then the top, but when you do the top second, it usually pushes that little collar back down a little bit, so you have to go get a regular hammer and punch that back through. This is the other rear bushing. As you can see, I already have the bottom in, and now I'm just placing the top in on top of that shaft, hammering down from the top, and then I'll go back underneath and hammer the metal shaft back through so that it sits flush with the top of the bushing.
And that's it. All 4 bushings are now installed. It was a full day project, about 12 hours, including 2 trips to Canadian Tire to go get some extra stuff I needed. There was no grease required to get these in. In fact, this one was the first one I got out. Got it a little too hot, as you can see. And I did bang it up from both sides pretty good. And I was able to press this one in all the way with my bare hands without the hammer at all. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. All the other ones took a fair bit of whaling, but nothing compared to getting the old ones out. That was a true nightmare. And all I can say is just make sure you have it as hot as you possibly can and have a really good sledgehammer and a couple energy drinks with you for the day. You're gonna need something hotter than just propane. I used some diesel fuel, which isn't quite as hot as propane, but it helped it burn in a greater surface area. Be creative, it's a long job, and I'm really looking forward to the results with this M3 subframe, M3 rear diff, axles, my Bilstein coilovers, M3 E93 rear sway bar, and these Condor Speed Shop rear subframe bushings.